Welcome to American Survival Guide Television with your host, Amber Hargrove.
Hi guys and welcome. Right now I have the one and only Tu Lam. Brother, thank you so much for joining us here at American Survival Guide. How are you?
Absolutely. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Definitely. We are incredibly excited. You are on the cover of the April magazine that is in stores right now for people to purchase, which is a phenomenal shot. I got to experience you firsthand in your training. It was one of the greatest experiences I've had. I got to say thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoy, and I had a great time teaching you and training you.
That was definitely fun. So when we talk about you, we got to know the real Tu Lam, which was really inspiring to many people as they read the article and about your journey. And you are an amazing person, not just you as a human being, but what you give to the world itself. So when we talk about Ronin Tactics, can you just give a brief synopsis of it so that we can talk about that?
Yeah, Ronin Tactics, it was my journey after, my time in service and war. It was my, kind of getting over and putting that the war to peace. And doing so, I started reaching out to the public. I started going teaching law enforcement. During my time in the special forces, I saw, I have seen what happens to the untrained, in these third world countries. And I just want to give back, I want to give back my philosophies, my experience, my life, and hopefully they can take these tools and better themselves as a human being.
I definitely appreciate that. And especially when I first met you, I wanted to know you as a person and create the storyline, but it was more than just a story. It was a huge adventure for you. I mean, you started out so little as a refugee. Are you okay if we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Can you tell us the story about you coming over on a boat?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born in December 17, in 1974. The Americans pretty much withdrew at that time. The North Vietnamese, the communist regime started surrounding Saigon. That's the city I was born in. My mother told me the morning that I was born, we were taking artillery fire into around that in the city of Saigon. She shielded my body the morning I was born. So pretty much I was born in war from the get-go. The North Vietnamese eventually took over Saigon and started influencing their communist ideologies upon the South Vietnamese people. And unfortunately, my uncles that served in the Vietnamese army that were a coalition force with the Americans, and when the Americans withdrew, they're the enemies. So my uncles were, some of them were executed, and the rest were imprisoned in what they call re-education camps. So basically, they're re-educating you on the communist ideologies. My mother said there's no way in hell that her two sons are ever going to grow up to be communists. So my grandfather took his life savings and basically smuggled us out of country. So on the cover of darkness one night, we went into a wooden fishing boat. Imagine what a fishing boat looks like. A small fishing boat. It's not like a luxury fishing boat. It was a wooden, old fishing boat stuffed with hundreds of refugees. And I was basically in the bottom of the boat. And the first thing we had to do was escape the piracy that was going on. So you have to think like the North Vietnamese took over South Vietnam. They're fleeing refugees. So with the fleeing refugees, we took everything we had. Basically, my mother layered us with clothes. So I think I had 3 outfits layered on me because that's the only thing we had. That's the only clothing that we had to sustain us on this trip. That many died. It was thousands of people that died during the escape from Vietnam, but my mother was willing to bet her life and our lives, on the escape. I think what was unique about this whole story was, like I said, the piracy that came in. So you have to think that Thailand, Indonesia, all these bandits are coming in to rape, pillage, and kill the escaping refugees. Well, when we escaped that night, my mother told me that the piracy was going on. They were trying to look for the ships. The the fishermen that ran our boat cut off our lights, and we basically sailed through the pine tree. So that was our first adventure. Our second adventure was we went into Malaysia, where you have to think there's thousands of refugees escaping Vietnam. So these other countries don't want to deal with housing refugees. And, think about Syria, right? Think about the modern day Syria, where people are escaping, they're getting killed. So we finally made it to Malaysia. My mother told me that they stopped us on the beach and kept us in a group. We didn't come for money. We barely escaped. And my mother said that it separated the rich people from the poor. Unfortunately, we were part of the poor group, and they loaded us back on boats, and they basically said that we America accepted us, and they drug us back out into the ocean. They shot our engine, cut the lines, and left us there to die. Right. So basically, we were floating on this wooden fishing boat with no engine in the middle of Pacific Ocean. So my mother told me that people started dying from starvation, dehydration. They started throwing the dead bodies over the boats. And my mother said that we got caught up in a storm. It was a huge storm, right? And hearing her story, Amber, it was amazing because, you're survivalists, and the amount of things that she had to go through. Like, she drank her own urine, that's survival, right? So we drifted further and further out in the ocean. I asked my mother how long did we drift, and she said she lost count at least 2 weeks, at least. My gosh. Right? So you think about that, right? During that time, there was a Russian supply boat that was leaving Vietnam. Now, a Russian supply boat, right? Communist regime, that's what we escaped from. They were leaving Vietnam, and they saw us kind of floating around in the middle of the ocean. So they stopped, and then they got a hold of our, basically the captain, and said, hey, if we were going into Vietnam, we would have grabbed you and pulled you back into Vietnam. But since we're leaving, we're going to take you guys and take you out of Vietnam. Wow. Right? So, I think back, Amber, on that story, and it really played out in my life, because this is a pivoting point. They always said, 2 to 4 is what shapes a person's character in life. Mm-hmm. So 2 to 4, I was escaping Vietnam. And where I want to go with this is this communist regime that took us out of our country, that killed my uncles, that in prison, was the same people that saved me. You see?
I know, that is insane.
So that's my first lesson on humanity, right? And that stuck with me. I know I was only 2, and I don't remember a lot of it, but that energy stuck with me. So they took us into Indonesia, right? And they threw us in a refugee camp. Now, when I say refugee camp, Amber, it's a plot of land in the jungle in a grass hut, and you live off that land. They don't give you food. They don't give you water, right? So a lot of thousands of people died, on in these refugee camps, because they would get raped, murdered, robbed. So it's all about survival. My mother, she's a strong-spirited lady, and she's a survivalist, So she lived off the land. She found food. She wheeled and deal, with the rich people. She was able to, my mother told me she was able to take jewelry from the rich people and go to these bandits who would kill her in a heartbeat and resell the jewelry, collect the money, and get the royalties off of doing that, because the rich people are too scared to deal with the bandits. You see, my mother is a really strong individual. And I asked her, I said, Mom, how long did we stay in the refugee camp? She said 1.5 years. So I want you to hear that. 1.5 years we lived off the land. You understand?
That is a really long time.
That's a long time to live in a grass hut in the land surviving around people that are willing to murder and kill you. And I asked my mom why so long. She said that, when we escaped Vietnam, she said that, the first country that accepted was Australia. They said, hey, you're welcome in our country. And then she kept on talking, and she said, then Canada came and said, hey, we accept you in our country as a refugee. And then I said, why didn't you go? And she said, I promised your grandfather that I'll reunite with my sister in America.
Oh.
And I want to say this because my aunt, right? My aunt married a Special Forces Green Beret lieutenant. He was an American. He fought the war. Their G base got overran by the Viet Congs. He was stabbed by a bayonet in the ribs. He was evacuated out of Vietnam, and he was this badass Green Beret, right? And my mother said that he expedited the paperwork. He wrote a letter to sponsor us to get us into America. So it took a year and a half, right? And then we came to Fayetteville, North Carolina, which is right outside of the biggest military base, especially special operations in all of America, right? So I landed there. That was my home, outside of the Special Forces, biggest Special Forces military base. So my mother eventually remarried. My biological father and my mother didn't work out, So my mother eventually remarried to American Special Forces Green Beret. He was a sergeant. At 8 years old, I was indoctrinated into the Special Forces. And when I say that was...
you were literally...
My training started at 8. I would wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I would run through the backwoods of Fort Bragg. I would learn weapons. I would speak different languages. I would raise the American flag in the morning, and just and understand the culture and the history.
Wow.
So my upbringing, you have to think, like, Vietnam wasn't a popular war. It was the first war that the media was able to get into a war zone, and they threw their spin on it. So very unpopular war, right? So think about all the veterans that came back, how they were treated. Now, I want to say this. I'm Vietnamese. And they don't know North Vietnamese or South Vietnamese. They just see me as this person, right, that looks different. Well, during the 80s, it's very racist times, and I dealt with racism at the extreme level. I was beaten daily. I was bullied. I was called all sorts of names. I didn't have any friends growing up. But, I didn't have time for friends because my father would work us. We had a company. It was a family company that my step-grandfather started after the Korean War. So after the Korean War, he to seek peace in himself, and he started this welding company. My father was in the Special Forces, and he designed assault ladders for Tier 1 units. And I was at 12 years old, I'm in his shop deburling assault ladders.
Oh my
Didn't
God.
know what I was doing. But what was interesting was I told my father, and I sent him a picture, when I was fighting the Iraq War, I was carrying these assault ladders on me. Yeah.
Wow.
Right. So growing up was very hard. We wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to the national anthem. I would raise the flag. I knew the Ballad of the Green Beret at 8 years old. I learned navigation, all this. So I didn't have friends. My friends were the Green Berets. So all these like legendary MACV SAW Sante Raiders, they would come into our house, and I would hear these stories at 8 years old, about what they did in Vietnam. So I grew up to that life. And I would say 13 was the age I knew I was going to be a Green Beret. I remember telling my mother that, and the reason why was I knew that was my ticket to go back, right? And I told her that. I said that I can go back in and I can help others.
Oh, that's good.
And she never wanted war for me. She said, I escaped you from Vietnam. you're this perfect child, you're smart, you're doing good in school. Why? And I said, I don't know. Now that I'm an adult, I do know. It was that energy. It was that energy at 2 years old when the Russians looked past race, looked past the war, and looked at us as a human being.
That's right.
And I stuck with it. So I knew that the Green Berets was my ticket back in, and I trained. From 13 years old, I started training because I knew my path. So academically, we're good. My brother and I, we had a very strict upbringing, education, and work. That was it, right? So that's what we did. My brother became a doctor, and I became a commando, right? So, at 18 years old, I went and joined the Army. There was no direct hire into the Green Berets back then. You had to be a sergeant, a E5, and you had to have at least 5 years in the Army. They want a little bit of maturity to go to the team. So I went to the 82nd, and I did roughly a year there with the Scouts. And then I went to the Long Range Reconnaissance Unit, where I was assigned to an amphibious reconnaissance team. Did that for 2 years, and as soon as I met the minimum requirement for the Green Berets, I dropped my packet and went to Special Forces Assessment and Selection. I went into the weapons course, and that took about roughly 8 months. Then I went through, the more advanced training, like SEER training and everything else. And now my first duty station was Okinawa, Japan.
Wow.
I wanted to leave home. I wanted to get away. I needed to get away from that environment. And I knew that. So I volunteered for Okinawa, Japan. And I went out there to Okinawa, and that's where I started understanding the Bushido Code. Right. I was always a martial artist, right? And the Bushido Code is a samurai code of ethics that arrived from the war-stained periods of Japan. So you think about Japan during the feudal periods, war periods of Japan. They fought civil war for over 200 years. Mm-hmm. And along with that came a ethics for a warrior, a code, a living. And I read that as a child, but when I was in Japan, I felt the energy,
Wow.
So I started studying more into the Green Berets, unconventional warfare. As in my 20s, I deployed 8 to 10 months out of a year, all through Asia, and I lived with the people. I went into Indonesia, I went into Malaysia, I went into all of these countries, Thailand, and what's cool, Amber, was I'll tell you my first mission. Right, my first mission was a demining mission out in Laos. So during the war, the Americans dropped thousands of landmines through the rice paddies, jungles, jungle floors. So what was happening was these children now would play around in these rice paddies and they'll get blown up, right? And I remember them sending us in, and I would see these amputees, right? These children. And I came off the helicopter, and I was walking with my linguist, my Terp, and this little girl came running up to me, and she said something. I didn't understand her language, so I was ready. I had bags of candies, right? I pulled out candy, I threw it at her, and then she shook her head. And I asked the Terp, I'm like, what is she saying? And he said, she wants a pencil. So I looked, I grabbed a pencil, I gave it to her. She kissed me on the cheek and ran off. They don't have pens or pencils here. They don't have paper. Right. So I thought about that. And that night, I constructed a jungle antenna, and I drafted an email asking for school supplies to be dropped into this LZ. And we rebuilt that village, gave them running water, gave them an education as I was teaching the village how to demine these landmines, how to find these landmines, and how to demine it so these kids can have an opportunity to grow. Now, that's the Special Forces, you see. Yes, we go to war and we fight our enemies, but that's the difference. We are embedded with the people, and I knew that at a very young age. my time in Special Forces in first group. Eventually, I went to Fort Bragg, where I served in a more classified assignment, and then fought the war there during the height of the war, the Iraq War, and then I started pushing out into the global pursuit on the enemies, and then I retired out with 10th Special Forces Group, and I started my journey. So this is where Ronin came to be. People always ask me, what a Ronin is. It's a master samurai. That's shameful, and I know samurai history to the T, and I know what the status of a Ronin is. You see, during my dark years, I fought 14 and a half years of war. I did 23 years of service to my country. And, there is emotional ties to certain regions. I've lost friends,
Oh.
So I faced my dark times. And during that dark time, I picked up a book. It's called The Book of Fine Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. And it was this Ronin who wrote this literature back in the year 1645. You see, he was born in the late 1500s, and he was a masterless samurai.
Wow.
He walked his own path, and he was so lethal that he started a style called Ishiru, which is dual swords. He's famous throughout history. And he meditated for 3 years and wrote the Book of Fire Rings in this Buddhist cave. 10 days after he finished his work, he died.
That is horrible.
That was his life's work, you see.
10 days after writing it.
10 days, but he was older. He was older during that time. He meditated during the book. When I was reading about him, he knew that he was coming down with a sickness, and he meditated for 3 years, found his peace, and wrote the book. Now, this book was a literature I picked up in the year 2013, and that literature, his words, is what allowed me the strength to move past war. And that's why I call myself a Ronin, because now I need to find my internal strength, right? And through my individual strength and my path of things, I am masterless. I'm free to do whatever I want, right? And what I want to do is I want to travel around America, and I want to help those, just like I help those oppressed around the world, as a Green Beret. I want to give my life lessons. I want to share my experiences. And maybe in this process, I can help them find their way, because Miyamoto Musashi wrote this book in 1645, and his words allow me to become a modern day Ronin. So I feel that I can help others by giving them my struggles, my life, right? Because through the struggles, we find ourselves, right?
That's right.
So that's really the Ronin Path. I did design some gear and equipment when I was overseas fighting a war. As a Green Beret, we're not happy with our gear.
I don't think we're ever happy with our gear in the military. Regardless of what we do, it's always something we find we're like, we wish we had this better, or whatever the case may be. So I get that. Yeah. So in 2006, we were climbing over walls, doing direct action operations, and our gun belts would fail on us. When I say fell on us, it would move on us. It would shift on us. A lot of the gun belts at that time was designed on a flat range. We know in combat and flat range are two different animals. So on a small war journal, I drafted a blueprint of what became the Ronin Delt. And during my time when I started getting over the war and I became a Ronin, my father asked me to write down my thoughts about war in journals. I have cases of journals where I wrote down the hard days during the war, losses, good times, places I've been. I drew pictures of palaces, jungles, you name it, right? I have them. And I was, during my recovery process of the war, I started breaking out these journals. And I remember reading my thoughts and emotions during, losses of my friends. And then I opened up a page, and there was that blueprint of this belt. Oh, perfect.
Right? And I'm like, wow, there it is, right? So my father, he runs a company. So I was able to manufacture it. And then now all majority of the tier 1 and SOCOM and special operations are running my gear.
And
So,
I love looking at the reviews of your gear, by the way, because every time I try to even get any of your gear, they sell out so quickly.
Oh gosh, yeah, because the Army
such a hot
and
commodity.
the Navy picked us up, and it's just trying to supply those guys. But Amber, what really makes me feel good about Ronin is that I'm still giving back, man. Like the gear is saving their lives overseas. I had messages from Rangers that say, "Hey, look, dude, your belt is on point," and it's helping us out on the battlefield. So I feel like to a certain extent, I'm still helping my military. I'm also traveling around America to do fundraisers to try to get more money for our combat veterans so they can receive better medical treatment. I do go to the Green Beret Navy SEAL Foundations to help the families of the fallen, because after the husband's gone, what are they going to do?
Exactly.
So we donate money and we try to get celebrities for fundraisers to try to give back in that arena. I'm also filming in Hollywood, and there's other projects that we're going to do later on this year. But the training venues has picked up, so it's been a really great journey, after my time in service, and I feel like this evolution of my life, I dedicated towards peace, and that's the person that I want to live and die as. I was born in war, and my whole life was war. I dedicated my life to that. So now at this stage in my life, it's about peace, and it's about trying to give people that energy to allow them to protect themselves. Right?
That's right.
That knowledge. So that's kind of like a snapshot of who I am in my journey.
Well, you covered so much, and there's so much more I learn about you. I think every time I get a chance to speak with you, and you are so inspirational to so many people out there, as well as the military and veterans out there in general. A lot of people have so much respect for you because of what you do. I just read this book called The Go-Giver, and you remind me of it so much. So I have so much respect for you, and what you bring to the table just in the training in general gives life to so many. There were so many different ages that came to your training, from single women to older men in their 50s or 60s. And I was like, wow, I was just watching these people train with you, and they got motivated. They were like, I can protect myself. And you're instilling that in them, which was how you were born into war. You were told you have to survive. And your mother, big shout out to her, much love. What an amazing woman. She should be given a Mother of the Year award. Just throwing that out there.
What's funny about my mother is, she never wanted me to join the military. In fact, Special Forces was something she said absolutely not. Join the military, but be some technical guy or be work in the medical field. And I knew that wasn't me, right? I knew that. And I love my mother. I respect her, but I know my path,
You can feel
and that's what I want to say to the viewers is that you have to understand your path. You have to listen to yourself. Don't listen to them. I know parents love them, but you can't live your life, right, underneath the opinions and judgment of others. You have to listen to yourself. As long as it's a noble path, you have to listen to yourself, and that's why I try to tell the students. It's not about all this combat and all this physical fitness and all that. It's about life. It's about living, and it's about achieving to become the person you wish to be in this world. Yeah.
Definitely. And the one thing that I took away from the training, which I appreciated most, was at the very end of it, we did the graduation, and you sat each individual down and you gave them counseling. And for me, it was like a guidance counselor. I got a chance to talk to you about my career and about what you view me as and how you interpreted me. And you were on point. Everything that you said, you're like, I watched this, this, and this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy just read me in 3 days just for my combat training. I was so impressed. And everybody who graduated that class said, everybody has to attend your training. They recommend it. I mean, your classes fill up all the time. It makes them feel like they're part of a family. So thank you for bringing that to just giving back in general, to give people that peace that they need. So, but you are on fire. You're on TV. You have an amazing military career, your upbringing. You have a beautiful wife, by the way, who is amazing. Giving a shout out to her.
Absolutely. She's the driving force behind, the supporting force, but she's also the business side of Ronin. She handles a lot of the administrative stuff to allow me time to do what I need to do with the audience, with the fans, with the students, whatever, you know what I mean? So she allows me that. I'm very thankful for that.
We're so grateful to have you. And if anybody's watching this interview, you definitely got to pick up the magazine, American Survival Guide. You can get it in tons of different stores out there with a picture of this guy's face on it right here. And inside of it, we go behind the scenes with your training. And what a blast. Thank you so much for allowing us into your life and your world. So
thank you.
You have anything you want to say to your fans?
No, I just want to say, hey, thank you for always, supporting me and being there. It's a mutual thing, it's not me just giving, it's you guys giving back to me, and I really appreciate that. I really feel it, the support and the love, and I want to say thank you. I also want to, dedicate this article to my parents, the one that gave me this opportunity in life and raised me right, and I want to thank my mother for her bravery, her strength, and also my wife that always supports me and has always been there through the good, bad, and also, now in business, so I want to thank you for allowing me to train you. And I thought it was a great experience, and I loved every moment of it.
I loved all of it. Even the Bruce was walking away. It was great. I'm kidding. It was wonderful. Thank you, brother, so much for everything. And we will definitely stay in touch with you and watch you throughout your career. And you are just a rock star. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Arigatou gozaimasu.